I never imagined that returning to my childhood home in Willow Creek would plunge me into a nightmare. My mother, Margaret, had always been the heart of our quiet neighborhood. Her garden, a lush oasis of roses, hydrangeas, and sunflowers, was the envy of everyone on Maple Lane. But when I moved back to care for her after her hip surgery, I quickly realized that the idyllic neighborhood I remembered was no more. The first sign of trouble came just days after I arrived. A sharp knock at the door interrupted our quiet evening. Standing on the porch was a woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She introduced herself as Linda Harper, the president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, HOA. "You must be Margaret's daughter," she said, clutching a clipboard to her chest. "We need to discuss some violations." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me to avoid disturbing my mother. Linda's French manicured finger jabbed at a list of infractions. The garden extended 6 inches beyond the property line. The mailbox was painted an unauthorized shade of blue, and the oak tree branches hung too low over the sidewalk. "My mother just had surgery," I protested. "Can this wait a few weeks?" Linda's smile tightened. "Rules exist for a reason. You have 7 days to correct these issues or face daily fines." As she marched away, our neighbor, Frank Thompson, waved from across the street. Later that evening, he brought over a casserole and some friendly advice. "Watch yourself with Linda," he warned. "She's made it her mission to control every inch of this neighborhood." Last year, the Martinez family had to sell their house after she bankrupted them with HOA fines over a wheelchair ramp that didn't match the approved aesthetic. That night, I researched HOA laws until my eyes burned. I discovered that many of their so-called violations weren't even legal to enforce. The property line issue particularly bothered me, so the next morning, I pulled the official survey from my mother's filing cabinet. As I measured the garden border, Linda's silver Lexus pulled up. She stepped out alongside a tall man with thinning hair and expensive loafers. "This is Gregory Palmer, our HOA attorney," she announced. "We're documenting continued violations." I held up the property survey. Actually, according to this official document, my mother's garden is completely within her property line. Palmer squinted at the paper. "That survey is outdated. The HOA commissioned a new one last year. Without notifying the homeowner? That's illegal in this state." I replied, thanking the hours of research I'd done. "I'm a civil engineer, Mr. Palmer. I understand property boundaries." Something flickered across Linda's face, surprise, maybe even respect before hardening again. Nevertheless, the other violations remain. The next day, I painted the mailbox the approved shade of beige and trimmed the lowest branches of the oak tree. Not because they were actual violations, but because my mother didn't need the stress of fighting those battles. For a week, things stayed quiet. I helped Mom with her recovery exercises and planted vegetables in the backyard. Then, one morning, I found a notice taped to our door: "Emergency HOA meeting. 7 p.m. All homeowners required to attend." The meeting was held in the community center, a sterile building with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly. Linda stood at the podium like a general addressing troops. 50 neighbors filled the chairs, many looking as uncomfortable as I felt. "Due to recent challenges to HOA authority," Linda began, her eyes finding me in the crowd, "we are implementing stricter enforcement protocols. The board has approved hiring a compliance officer who will conduct daily neighborhood inspections." An older man in the back raised his hand. "How much will this cost us?" "Dues will increase by due law 100 monthly," Linda replied smoothly. The room erupted in murmurs. I stood up. "May I ask a question?" Linda nodded stiffly. "Who owns the company being hired for compliance enforcement?" Her hesitation told me everything. "Palmer Security Consultants is highly qualified. Owned by Gregory Palmer, the HOA attorney." I finished. "Isn't that a conflict of interest?" The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. Some neighbors thanked me for speaking up. Others warned me to stop making waves. Frank introduced me to Sarah Jennings, who had served on the HOA board until resigning 6 months earlier. "They're after your mother's property," Sarah whispered as people filed out. "The corner lots are valuable for the commercial rezoning plan." "What rezoning plan?" I asked, but Sarah shook her head. "Not here. Meet me tomorrow at the library." The next day, I met Sarah at the library. She brought maps and documents showing plans to convert our neighborhood into a massive shopping complex. Linda's husband owned the development company. Your mother and 5 other homeowners refused to sell, Sarah explained. With enough violations and fines, they're hoping to force foreclosures. As we left the library, I noticed a black SUV following us. Sarah hurried away, looking terrified. I snapped a photo of the license plate before heading home. Mom was sitting on the porch when I arrived, staring at what remained of her garden. Something's not right with the soil, she said quietly. It looks different. I knelt down to examine the disturbed earth. That's when I noticed the thin wire barely visible above the dirt. Don't move, Mom, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. Stay exactly where you are. Her eyes widened as she saw my face. What's wrong? I pointed to the thin wire poking through the soil where her roses once grew. I don't know what this is, but it doesn't look like drainage equipment. Carefully, I took my phone out and called Officer Martinez, keeping my voice steady though my hands shook. I need you to come to 724 Maple Lane immediately. There's something suspicious buried along our property line by the HOA workers yesterday. Officer Martinez arrived with another policeman, a taller officer with a weathered face named Sergeant Reynolds. Show us exactly what you found, Reynolds said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much to be easily surprised. I pointed to the wire. Reynolds knelt down, examining it without touching anything. His expression changed instantly. Get back to the cruiser, Martinez. Call the bomb squad and evacuate the houses on either side. Now. My mouth went dry. Bomb squad. Reynolds stood, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. Sir, I spent 2 tours in Afghanistan. That's a trigger wire for an explosive device. Someone's planted something dangerous here. The next hour passed in a blur. Police cars blocked off our street. Men in heavy protective gear carefully dug where I pointed. Neighbors gathered behind yellow tape, whispering and pointing. Through my living room window, Mom and I watched in horrified silence. A technician in a bulky suit approached our house, removing his helmet as he climbed the porch steps. His face was sweaty and grim. We've secured the area, he reported. You have M14 anti-personnel mines planted along your property line. Military grade. Not something civilians should have access to. Each one contains enough explosives to kill anyone within a 15-foot radius. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. My God, who would do this? I demanded, though I already suspected the answer. The bomb technician shook his head. That's not my department. The detective will want to speak with you. As if summoned by his words, a plainclothes officer appeared at our door, introducing herself as Detective Collins. She was shorter than me, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Mr. DeVys, Mrs. DeVys, I'm handling this investigation. Can you think of anyone who would want to harm you? Mom looked too shocked to speak, so I answered. The HOA has been pressuring us. They dug up the garden yesterday, right where you found those mines. Detective Collins' expression remained neutral, but she wrote quickly in her notebook. Any witnesses to the digging? Several neighbors must have seen it. And the HOA president, Linda Harper, Super VY, said the whole thing. The workers wore uniforms from Palmer Landscaping Ser VY, related to Gregory Palmer, the HOA attorney. Detective Collins nodded, connecting dots. Interesting. Anyone else we should know about? I hesitated, then told her about Sarah Jennings, the rezoning plans, and the black SUV that followed us. You've been busy, Collins commented. One more question. Do you have security cameras? No, but Frank Thompson across the street does. His system captures part of our front yard. Detective Collins' eyes lit up. Let's pay Mr. Thompson a visit. Frank welcomed us into his cluttered home office, where monitors displayed feeds from several security cameras. I installed these after my car was vandalized last year, he explained. The system stores footage for 30 days. He typed commands, bringing up yesterday's recording. We watched workers in Palmer Landscaping uniforms digging up Mom's garden under Linda's Super VY shown. Can you go back further? Detective Collins asked. Frank scrolled back to 3 nights pre-VYS. At 2:17 a.m., the camera captured 4 shadowy figures in dark clothing approaching our property line. Zooming in, the image quality wasn't perfect, but clear enough to identify Linda Harper, Gregory Palmer, and 2 men I didn't recognize. They carried duffel bags and worked methodically along our property line, digging small holes and placing objects inside. "That's our smoking gun," Detective Collins said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Mr. Thompson, I'll need a copy of this footage." Mom's face had gone pale. "They were trying to kill us over a garden dispute." "Not just that," I reminded her. "Sarah showed me plans to turn our neighborhood into a shopping complex. Your lot is crucial because it's on the corner." Detective Collins was already on her phone, requesting warrants. "We'll need to search the HOA office and Palmer's business." "Mr. DeVys, is there somewhere your mother can stay tonight? We'll have officers stationed here, but I'd feel better if you both were elsewhere until we secure all EVY. My sister, Emily, lived an hour away. She agreed to take Mom while I stayed behind with the police." After Mom left, Detective Collins showed me something the bomb squad had discovered, a map in one of the duffel bags the suspects had accidentally left behind. It marked landmine locations across several properties, all belonging to homeowners who had refused to sell. "This goes beyond harassment or intimidation," Collins said gravely. "We're looking at conspiracy to commit murder, terrorism, illegal possession of military weapons, the list goes on." While we talked, her phone buzzed with a text. She read it, her expression darkening. "They just arrested Linda Harper at her home. She's claiming the HOA board knew nothing about this, says it was all Palmer's idea." "Do you believe her?" I asked. "Not for a second," Collins replied. "People like Linda don't take orders. They give them." That night, as I tried to sleep in our empty house with a police cruiser parked outside, my phone lit up with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Back off. Next time, we'll make sure your mother walks into something that can't be disarmed." I showed the message to the officers outside, who added it to their EVY. Sleep became impossible after that. I paced the house, jumping at every creak and shadow. At dawn, I stood at the window, watching officers catalog EVY along our property line. The horror of what might have happened kept hitting me in waves. Mom's daily routine included checking her mail first thing each morning. She would have walked right into those mines. Detective Collins arrived with coffee and news. "We've got all 4 suspects in custody, but they've lawyered up. The DA is pushing for no bail given the severity of the charges." "What about the text threat?" I asked. "We traced it to a burner phone purchased with cash. But here's where it gets interesting. The security camera at the store where it was bought captured Kyle Harper buying it Linda's son. I remembered seeing a young man with her at HOA meetings, always on his phone, looking bored." "Exactly. And when we searched Palmer's office, we found documents suggesting this isn't isolated to your neighborhood. They've done this in 2 other communities in the state." I sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "All for money. Money, power, control," Collins shrugged. "You stood up to them, questioned their authority publicly. People like Linda Harper can't tolerate that." The doorbell rang. It was Frank Thompson with a casserole and news of his own. "The neighborhood's in an uproar," he reported as Detective Collins excused herself to take a call. "Half the HOA board has resigned. There's talk of emergency elections." "Let someone else deal with that," I said wearily. "I'm just focused on keeping Mom safe." Frank nodded sympathetically. "Sarah Jennings called a meeting at her house tonight. A lot of us want to make things right, show that we're not all like Linda." Detective Collins returned, her expression serious. "We just executed a search warrant at Harper's Development Company. You need to see what we found." She placed her tablet on the table, displaying photographs of documents and emails. One showed a list of homeowners labeled Phase 1 targets, with my mother's name at the top. Another contained detailed instructions for acquiring and placing Persuasion de VYCS on selected properties. "This wasn't just about your mother," Collins explained. "You were first because you challenged them publicly, but they had plans for every holdout property. And there's more. We found connections to similar accidents in other communities where residents mysteriously decided to sell after strange incidents on their properties." "How deep does this go?" I asked, feeling the floor shift beneath me. Collins' answer chilled me to the bone. "We're bringing in the FBI. This crosses state lines and involves military-grade weapons. Your HOA president isn't just a neighborhood tyrant, part of an organized criminal enterprise." As we spoke, another officer rushed in. "Detective, we've got a situation. Kyle Harper just tried to access the EVY locker. When he was stopped, they found this in his possession. He held up an EVY Denke bag containing what looked like a remote detonator. He was trying to trigger the remaining DVYCS, Collins realized, already reaching for her radio. All units, sweep the DVYS property again immediately. We may have missed something. I stood frozen, staring out at what used to be my mother's peaceful garden, now a crime scene wrapped in yellow tape. Somewhere beneath that innocent-looking soil might still be hidden something deadly, waiting for the press of a button. What else had they planted that we hadn't found yet? The next few days were a blur of FBI agents, search warrants, and media attention. The HOA's web of lies unraveled quickly, but the danger was far from over. Linda Harper, Gregory Palmer, and their associates were arrested, but their connections ran deep. The FBI discovered that Apex Development, the company behind the rezoning plan, had ties to organized crime. They had been using the HOA as a front to force homeowners out of valuable properties across the state. Mom and I were moved to a safe house while the investigation continued. The stress took a toll on her health, but she remained resilient. "This is our home," she said firmly. "They don't get to bully us out of it." The trial was a media circus. Linda Harper, Gregory Palmer, and several Apex executives faced charges of racketeering, attempted murder, fraud, and money laundering. The EVY Denke was overwhelming. Security footage, emails, and testimony from former HOA members like Sarah Jennings. During the trial, it was revealed that the real reason they wanted Mom's property was not for a shopping center, but for an underground aquifer. Apex planned to bottle and sell the water, worth millions. Mom laughed when she heard the news. All this over water? I would have let them drill a well if they'd asked nicely. With the corrupt HOA dissolved, the neighborhood voted to create a new community council with term limits and financial transparency. Mom was elected head of the gardening committee, and her roses bloomed once again. As spring arrived, the neighborhood came together for an impromptu cookout. Children played where landmines had once been buried, and adults shared stories of HOA harassment, finally free to speak openly. To new beginnings, Sarah Jennings toasted, raising her lemonade. I watched Mom smile, surrounded by genuine community at last, and thought, sometimes you have to risk everything to protect what truly matters. The trial of Linda Harper, Gregory Palmer, and the Apex executives dominated the news for months. The EVY Denke was damning, and the public outcry was immense. The FBI's investigation revealed a sprawling network of corruption that extended far beyond Willow Creek. Similar schemes had been carried out in at least 5 other neighborhoods across the state, with Apex Development using HOAs as a front to force homeowners out of valuable properties. As the trial progressed, more details emerged about the extent of the conspiracy. Linda Harper, once the seemingly untouchable HOA president, was revealed to be a key player in a criminal enterprise that included bribery, blackmail, and even murder. Gregory Palmer, the HOA attorney, had been the mastermind behind the legal maneuvering, using his knowledge of property law to exploit homeowners and cover up the group's crimes. The trial ended with con-VY tie-ins for all the major players. Linda Harper and Gregory Palmer were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Apex executives received lengthy prison terms, and the company was dissolved, its assets seized to compensate the VY Tims. For Mom and me, the trial was both a relief and a source of lingering anxiety. While justice had been served, the scars of what we had been through remained. Mom's health, already fragile, had taken a toll from the stress. She spent several weeks in the hospital recovering, and even after she was discharged, she was more cautious, more wary of the world around her. With the corrupt HOA dissolved, the neighborhood held an emergency meeting to establish a new community council. The turnout was overwhelming. Nearly every homeowner in Willow Creek showed up, eager to have a say in the future of their community. The new council was designed to be transparent and accountable. Term limits were put in place to prevent any one person from accumulating too much power. Financial records would be made available to all residents, and decisions would be made by majority vote rather than by a small, unaccountable board. Mom was elected head of the gardening committee, a role she embraced with her usual enthusiasm. Her roses, once destroyed by Linda Harper's VY vindictiveness, began to bloom again, a symbol of the neighborhood's resilience. But not everyone was ready to move on. Some residents, scarred by the trauma of the past year, remained suspicious of any form of authority. Others, like Frank Thompson and Sarah Jennings, became vocal advocates for change, determined to ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. Just as life in Willow Creek seemed to be returning to normal, a new threat emerged. One evening, as Mom and I were sitting on the porch enjoying the cool autumn air, a car pulled up to the curb. The driver, a man in a dark suit, stepped out and approached us. "Ms. De VYS?" he asked, his tone polite but firm. "Yes," I replied, standing up and positioning myself between him and Mom. "I'm with the FBI," he said, flashing a badge. "Agent Donovan, we need to speak with you about a matter of national security." My heart skipped a beat. "What's this about?" Agent Donovan glanced around, as if checking to make sure we were alone. "It's about the landmines," he said quietly. "We've discovered that they were part of a larger operation, one that goes far beyond Willow Creek." Agent Donovan explained that the landmines found in our yard were just the tip of the iceberg. The FBI had uncovered evidence of a nationwide network of corrupt HOAs, developers, and organized crime groups working together to seize valuable properties for their own gain. The operation was sophisticated, with ties to international arms dealers and even foreign governments. "We believe that the landmines were intended not just to intimidate homeowners, but to send a message," Donovan said. "A warning to anyone who might consider standing in their way." "But why us?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "Why our neighborhood?" "Your property sits on an aquifer," Donovan replied. "But it's not just about the water. Willow Creek is a test case, a blueprint for how they plan to operate in other communities across the country." Agent Donovan insisted that Mom and I relocate to a safe house until the investigation was complete. "You're key witnesses in this case," he said. "And until we can dismantle the entire network, you're in danger." Reluctantly, we agreed. The safe house was a modest cabin in the mountains, far from Willow Creek. It was peaceful, but the isolation was difficult for Mom, who missed her garden and her neighbors. While we were in hiding, the FBI continued its investigation. More arrests were made, and the scope of the conspiracy grew clearer. It seemed that every day brought new revelations: more corrupt officials, more shell companies, more VY-Tims. The investigation culminated in a series of coordinated raids across the country. Dozens of suspects were arrested, including high-ranking officials in several states. The media dubbed it Operation Silent War, and it became one of the largest crackdowns on organized crime in recent history. But the VY Tory came at a cost. During one of the raids, Agent Donovan was shot and critically injured. He served VY Ved, but the incident was a stark reminder of the dangers we still faced. With the network dismantled and the immediate threat neutralized, Mom and I were finally able to return home. The neighborhood had changed in our absence. The sense of community was stronger than ever, but there was also a newfound awareness of the need for VY vigilance. Mom's garden, once a symbol of her resilience, became a gathering place for the neighborhood. Children played among the roses, and neighbors stopped by to chat and share stories. It was a far cry from the fear and suspicion that had once dominated Willow Creek. As the months passed, life in Willow Creek began to return to normal. The new community council worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and ensure that the neighborhood remained a safe and welcoming place for everyone. Mom, ever the optimist, took it upon herself to organize a neighborhood picnic. It was a celebration of everything we had overcome and a reminder of the strength of our community. As I watched Mom laugh and chat with her neighbors, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The scars of the past would always be there, but they were a reminder of how far we had come. The story of Willow Creek became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of community. Mom's garden, once a battleground, became a symbol of hope and resilience. As for me, I knew that the fight wasn't over. There would always be those who sought to exploit others for their own gain. But I also knew that, together, we could stand up to them and win. Years later, as I walked through Mom's garden with my own children, I thought about everything we had been through. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air. The oak tree, once a source of conflict, now pro-VY dead shade for a new generation of children playing on a tire swing. Mom, now in her 80s, sat on the porch, watching with a smile. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "We protected what truly matters." And as I looked out at the neighborhood we had fought so hard to save, I knew she was right. The silent war was over, but the lessons we had learned would last a lifetime. Life in Willow Creek had settled into a peaceful rhythm after the tumultuous events of the past few years. The neighborhood had healed, and the new community council had proven to be a model of transparency and cooperation. Mom's garden was thriving, and the once dead community had come together in ways we never thought possible. But beneath the surface, there were still lingering tensions. Some residents remained wary, their trust in authority shattered by the corruption that had nearly destroyed our neighborhood. Others, like Frank Thompson and Sarah Jennings, continued to advocate for stronger safeguards to prevent future abuses of power. For Mom and me, the scars of the past were still there, but we had learned to live with them. We had survived, and that was enough. One crisp autumn morning, as I was helping Mom prune her roses, a car pulled up to the curb. The driver, a woman in her late 30s with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped out and approached us. "Ms. DeVys?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. "Yes," I replied, standing up and positioning myself between her and Mom. "I'm Agent Ramirez with the FBI," she said, flashing a badge. "We need to speak with you about a matter of national security." My heart skipped a beat. "What's this about?" Agent Ramirez glanced around, as if checking to make sure we were alone. "It's about the landmines," she said quietly. "We've discovered that they were part of a larger operation, one that goes far beyond Willow Creek." Agent Ramirez explained that the landmines found in our yard were just the tip of the iceberg. The FBI had uncovered evidence of a nationwide network of corrupt HOAs, developers, and organized crime groups working together to seize valuable properties for their own gain. The operation was sophisticated, with ties to international arms dealers and even foreign governments. "We believe that the landmines were intended not just to intimidate homeowners, but to send a message," Ramirez said. "A warning to anyone who might consider standing in their way." "But why us?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "Why our neighborhood?" "Your property sits on an aquifer," Ramirez replied. "But it's not just about the water. Willow Creek is a test case, a blueprint for how they plan to operate in other communities across the country." Agent Ramirez insisted that Mom and I relocate to a safe house until the investigation was complete. "You're key witnesses in this case," she said. "And until we can dismantle the entire network, you're in danger." Reluctantly, we agreed. The safe house was a modest cabin in the mountains, far from Willow Creek. It was peaceful, but the isolation was difficult for Mom, who missed her garden and her neighbors. While we were in hiding, the FBI continued its investigation. More arrests were made, and the scope of the conspiracy grew clearer. It seemed that every day brought new revelations: more corrupt officials, more shell companies, more victims. The investigation culminated in a series of coordinated raids across the country. Dozens of suspects were arrested, including high-ranking officials in several states. The media dubbed it Operation Silent War, and it became one of the largest crackdowns on organized crime in recent history. But the victory came at a cost. During one of the raids, Agent Ramirez was shot and critically injured. She survived, but the incident was a stark reminder of the dangers we still faced. With the network dismantled and the immediate threat neutralized, Mom and I were finally able to return home. The neighborhood had changed in our absence. The sense of community was stronger than ever, but there was also a newfound awareness of the need for vigilance. Mom's garden, once a symbol of her resilience, became a gathering place for the neighborhood. Children played among the roses, and neighbors stopped by to chat and share stories. It was a far cry from the fear and suspicion that had once dominated Willow Creek. As the months passed, life in Willow Creek began to return to normal. The new community council worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and ensure that the neighborhood remained a safe and welcoming place for everyone. Mom, ever the optimist, took it upon herself to organize a neighborhood picnic. It was a celebration of everything we had overcome and a reminder of the strength of our community. As I watched Mom laugh and chat with her neighbors, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The scars of the past would always be there, but they were a reminder of how far we had come. The story of Willow Creek became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of community. Mom's garden, once a battleground, became a symbol of hope and resilience. As for me, I knew that the fight wasn't over. There would always be those who sought to exploit others for their own gain. But I also knew that, together, we could stand up to them and win. Years later, as I walked through Mom's garden with my own children, I thought about everything we had been through. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance filling the air. The oak tree, once a source of conflict, now pro-VY dead shade for a new generation of children playing on a tire swing. Mom, now in her 80s, sat on the porch, watching with a smile. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "We protected what truly matters." And as I looked out at the neighborhood we had fought so hard to save, I knew she was right. The silent war was over, but the lessons we had learned would last a lifetime. As the years passed, Willow Creek continued to thrive. The neighborhood became a model for other communities, a testament to the power of resilience and unity. Mom's garden remained a centerpiece, a levying reminder of the battles we had fought and the VY Tories we had won. One sunny afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Mom, watching the children play, I realized that the story of Willow Creek was far from over. It was a story of hope, of courage, and of the enduring strength of community. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the roses, I knew that we had truly found peace. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.